Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining this keynote interview. What we will be discussing today is a topic that we have been hearing a lot, especially in the past few months. We are going to talk about analytics, so how to deal with data and how we can actually use them in order to react to the changes in consumer behavior. I have the pleasure to have here with me Kshira Saagar, Director of Data Science and Analytics for the Global Fashion Group and The Iconic. Hello, Kshira.
Hi, Esther. How are you? Thank you so much for having me.
Before we start, I'll give a brief introduction of myself, and then I'll invite you, Kshira, to introduce yourself, your function, and your company. Retail in Asia is a news platform that covers whatever happens in retail in the Asia Pacific region. We have a 3-weekly newsletter, so feel free to register for free and keep yourself updated with whatever happens in this side of the world. And Kshira, if you can also explain to us Global Fashion Group and The Iconic and the latest developments about your company.
Sure. Thanks, Esther. So, like Esther mentioned, my name is Kshira. I take care of data science for Global Fashion Group. And Global Fashion Group is a consortium of 4 e-commerce companies across the world. So the one that everyone might know in Southeast Asia is Zalora, which is the one that is in Singapore, Malaysia, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Indonesia, and Philippines. We have something called The Iconic, which is a similar e-commerce entity, but in Australia and New Zealand. We have what we call La Moda, which is exactly the same, but called La Moda in Russia and Commonwealth of Independent States, and Graffiti in Latin America. But although the names are different, what we do across all the 4 regions and 17 countries is sell clothing and footwear online. So that's pretty much what we do. We are a pure play online retailer, and we sell clothing and footwear online. And in all these markets, we're kind of the market leader for online fashion in these markets. So that's how we like to describe ourselves. And in GFG, my role is to make sure that we can do 3 things. I call my role the ABC role. A, as an advisor, so we make sure that data acts as an advisory body. We make sure that any decision that's made regarding customers, regarding brands, regarding products, we get an advice from data, just like you'd get advice from legal or finance or any other team similar to that. B, we build teams and build trust in the data that we have, because it's really important to actually be able to build a team to deliver on your data promises. And the biggest problem with working with data is trust. People will believe your numbers if they look good, and if they won't believe your numbers if they don't look good. So how do you build that trust? So that's trust. And C is we basically create value, is how I describe it. So creating value could be making customers' life easier, making employees' life easier, or making our suppliers and merchants' lives easier. So basically, our job is to make people's life easier by either automating or augmenting or using artificial intelligence to apply solutions at scale. So that's kind of what I do for GFG, and that's my role.
And I mean, since we have seen in these months that e-commerce was the hot topic, even for brands that initially were a bit reluctant to sell online, and your group covered different, countries, and you are currently based in Australia. I'm sure everyone is wondering, in terms of data, what type of trends have you seen emerging, if anything difference, or basically is just, as most media are reporting, an acceleration of what was supposed to happen anyway?
Yeah. So like you said, typically, like media reports, as you've seen and as you'd have logically guessed, a lot of sales definitely has gone online. But what I will talk about is something a bit more interesting and something that people typically don't talk about. It's how people shop and when people shop and what people shop has changed a lot. So let me explain that. So what I mean by how is a small example of how people shop is back in people used to pick up their phone, they go on their app and then shop because they're on their way to work, they're coming back from work, or they sat in their living room watching TV. But now people shop a lot more from desktops, which basically means they're shopping in between their work time, so whatever it is that they do, right? So because they're not shopping heavily in the mornings and the evenings, they're shopping throughout the day, which means there's nobody looking at your computer and seeing what you do, so you're shopping on your desktop. So that has changed how people shop. And similarly, when people shop, people used to heavily shop on like some days of the week, because delivery is a bigger challenge, right? So if you shop on the weekday, you'll get it on a weekday, but if you shop on a weekend, you will not get it on it's going to be delayed. but that behavior has changed again. People seem to be shopping more on a weekend now because they have nothing much to do. So they shop. It's, a lot of these things have changed. Fundamentally, how people shop, how much time do they spend browsing a particular product has changed considerably. So previously, where one thing you didn't have was time. So you would just quickly look at it, you'd do some review and buy. But now you have time on your hands, so you can do the comparisons and review and read through the product. So it takes a longer research path to buy. So those are things that have changed, which basically means a lot of our algorithms and approaches to personalization that had certain thresholds have all changed now because people have changed how they behave. So that's something that I see tremendously having changed in the last few months.
And in terms of country coverage, I mean, you're based in Australia. Anything specific to a specific market?
This is quite similar. What I mentioned is similar across all the markets. Very specific to Australia is not still predominantly mobile heavy, which means unlike the Asian markets, we're still heavy on desktop usage. The penetration in terms of e-commerce is still very low. And in that market, we see that people are reverting. A lot more newer people are coming to the online world because people are suddenly hearing that, yes, you can buy stuff online. It might seem funny for somebody else from an Asian market where everyone knows things happen online. But in Australia, I think that awareness is actually doubled almost. So a lot of customers that we've been receiving are all mostly new customers shopping for first time, seem to be shopping first time online. And so that is a trend that is very local to Australia than other markets, where in the other markets, it's still a price competitive game. But in Australia, it's still people are realizing and finding and discovering stuff online.
And I mean, during this COVID-19 crisis, we also have heard a lot about sustainability and how this is a new drive. And with the Iconic, my understanding is that is an e-commerce platform, but that has a very strong focus on sustainable brands. Is there anything that basically has shown higher interest towards those brands in the past few months?
Definitely when COVID started, a lot more people were focused. So that was a normal peak, a spike that you would expect. But I think it has subsided and gone back to the usual trends as far as I can see in terms of people's interest, in terms of people's engagement with it. So that peak is not sustained, but it is definitely getting better over time. So we look at it as a trend that needs to get better over time, and it's definitely getting better. But it was more of a spike rather than a sustained increase in people's preference for sustainable brands. And I think it's not because they don't want to. I think it's also a function of due to the lockdown and due to global supply chain crunch. I think a lot of brands are stuck in different places. Products are not moving. So I think that's also a function of why there was a spike. So everyone is trying to buy whatever sustainable products are there. And then now we don't have stuff coming in. We're an island here. So I think that's also part of a reason why we see it going back to the usual trends.
And I mean, once we have addressed the COVID-19 crisis, that was a bit of the elephant in the room that we had to talk about. Going back to your function and I mean, what you do on a daily basis, also, let's say pre-COVID, and hopefully we will have a post-COVID-19 soon. In terms of expectation in building a trusted relationship between organizations and customers, because you deal with data and there is always this, I mean, kind of, you know, privacy and security about data, that it's a huge challenge. What have been the latest developments in this direction, and how do you feel customer, I mean, perceive organization treating their data?
I think that's a fair question to ask, and people are getting, to your point, like you mentioned, people are getting more and more aware about these things with all the privacy hacks going on everywhere and social networks compromising on data. So I think that's definitely, people are getting more aware. And what that has done on our end is we try to be very careful about what we do with customer data. So I like to think about it as three different wings. One is what data you even track and capture, right? By design, what do you track and capture? So even at that stage, we make it very clear that we don't capture a lot of personally identifiable information. Age and gender and stuff like that are optional. So nobody has to enter them mandatorily. So that automatically, a lot of people are not comfortable sharing that information, which is good. And we can infer your age and infer your gender based on how you shop and what you do. So we don't collect that. The only personally identifiable information or PII we collect are email IDs and phone numbers and addresses. And what we do is whatever we collect, we make it really sure that comes to the second part is who in the company has access to this data and how much of it is open to like the outside environments. And we make it absolutely clear that only a handful of people can even access that data. And for everyone else in the business, it's completely pseudonymized or anonymized or whatever you want to call it. So it's all hashed. Nobody can see anybody's email ID. Nobody can see their phone number or address. So that is the level of data security and privacy that we've done. And there's a lot of work gone into it. First, identifying where do these data, where all do they sit? How do we have to treat them? How do we make sure that if we treat them, we can work back and figure out what needs to be done and who needs to have access? So that's the second part. And the third part, and the most important part that we're trying to do, is also educate our customers and also our employees on what data is good to use and what is not good to use. And so let me give you an example. So for our employees, if you're building an algorithm, say a marketing algorithm about personalization, we typically recommend not to use any demographic or characterize data that like age or gender. We don't break people down based on age and gender. We break people down into groups based on what they do. So it's no longer about who they are, but about what they do. And that is what you can call it ethical AI. You can call it ethical usage of data. We make it really clear that we don't use any personally identifiable information to make any decisions on what the customers need to see or feel or be reacted to. And so that is the third part that we're trying to work on. So those are three big areas that we're trying to work on. And I wouldn't say we are 100% there, but we've actually managed to do quite a bit of it through the process. And it's going to be a journey in the next few months.
So it's a little bit like grouping people based on their own lifestyle and interest in kind of analyzing communities and tribes. So in a way, as you mentioned, it's no longer the individual itself, but it's the type of community around specific actions.
Yes, yes. And also so that people don't feel like we're very, very mindful that we don't use, data, at the end of the day, an algorithm is just going to be biased based on what input is fed. So if we can keep the input data completely non-discriminatory, we can make sure the output is also fair and non-discriminatory.
And talking about, what to do and what not to do, what type of lessons have you learned about the right and maybe wrong ways of applying data in terms of customer experience?
Okay, it's a good question. So from a customer experience point of view, what I would say is we've learned, and we've learned it the hard way and from a lot of mistakes that we made, is the right way to use data is to solve three things, or one big thing for a customer is to reduce the uncertainty. It could be uncertainty of what to shop for. It could be the uncertainty of when will my item reach me. It could be uncertainty of what is happening with my delivery, what is happening with my refund and stuff like that. So if you can alleviate a lot of customer uncertainty, I think that is the best way to use data. So let me give you examples, right? How do you reduce uncertainty with shopping? Is you could personalize the catalog, you can personalize, make filters easy. You can make the shopping experience much less intimidating, because a lot of people are shopping for the first time, at least in some of the markets. They don't know, if you're searching for a black dress, there could be 100 black dresses. So how do I know what black dress to find? So how do I reduce that uncertainty is one thing. And other things in terms of where is my order, when will it reach? If you can keep giving them the right information, if it's getting delayed somewhere, if you can send them an email saying it's going to be delayed, it's on its way, whatever it is, right? So I think if you can reduce those uncertainties and points of friction, that is the best way to use customer data. Or it could be from a marketing point of view, just showing you things that you need to see and not everything. You could be selling everything, but if I can personalize the email for you to only show things that you might like and you might want to discover, I think that makes your experience much easier, rather than saying, here, these are all the 1 million things we sell. This is our catalog. That's not how you want to sell anymore. So that's the right way to use it. I wouldn't say the wrong way, but the inefficient way to use data is to hyper personalize and hyper target something. So sometimes people take it to the extreme. So what I'm talking about reducing uncertainties, sometimes you take it to the extreme of, I know you saw this, why don't you buy it? It's a bit creepy. Not that people don't know that you're being tracked, but people don't want that kind of a messaging anymore. They don't want to deal with, like you said, people want to have a trusted relationship with brands. And when you go hyper personal, when you tell people, I know what you did yesterday on this phone device, and therefore you should buy it.
Creepy in that.
it's a bit creepy, and people like, oh, maybe I should not buy with this person anymore because they know everything, and so you don't want to switch people off, or turn people off, and I think that's the wrong way to use data.
So if we want to think about the customer journey and we had to identify the explicit touch points or stages, which ones would they be that they make the best customer experience? You mentioned, I mean, delivery, the idea that the transaction needs to be smooth, no point of friction in specific areas. Like, how would you describe the ideal customer journey?
So we realized that you need to put a lot of emphasis. So let's think of it as a funnel, right? Like, you know about who we are, awareness. You come with an intention to buy with us, then you make some purchase, and then you eventually shop, and then you come back again. I think so. Let's say the top of the funnel is the most important bit, because a lot of conversion optimization, everything focused on the bottom of, which is how do you get someone to buy. But what we miss out on is, it's not a one-off relationship you want to have with customers. There are only so many customers, and there are only so many times you want to advertise to them. So how do you make sure that you engage with them in a way where they feel like, yeah, this makes sense, this app is good, or this product is good, or the site is good, I know what I can get, it's easier to use it. So basically a lot of customer experience at the top of the funnel, which is if they're searching for something, if they want an inspiration, or if they want to buy for an occasion, whatever it is, it's easier for them to buy. So making that experience easier is the hardest and the most rewarding part for a customer, so that he or she will say, yep, I bought it and I like what I have. The delivery was good, everything else is good, so I'm going to go back to them and buy again. So we focus a lot on making that part much more easier and more engaged. And we like to look at, so for inspiration, we look at things like social media networks, where the famous secret formula for Facebook was, if you have 7 friends, you're going to keep coming back. Or if you're in LinkedIn, if you have like 10 connections, you're going to keep coming. So basically, what can we do to increase engagement? What typically publishers do to increase engagement is something that we also try to do from an e-commerce point of view.
And I mean, since you mentioned this connection between e-commerce and social media, and we have seen, I mean, especially in, I would say, the past 8-12 months, a kind of shift from pure transactional platforms to more of social commerce. In which way data are, I mean, useful or can be used in order to build content?
So one is discovery. For a lot of social commerce, all you need is discovery. So discovery is, best example is Spotify. They can show you things that you might never have heard of, never have seen, but it's in your taste profile, it's in your friend's taste profile and stuff like that. So data can be really, really useful in surfacing things for people and inspiring them to find out what's out there. So that's one big part. The other part is basically making it the fit for purchase, or what do I call? For example, from a fashion point of view, a lot of times the issue that you don't buy online is, if I buy something, would it be loose for me or tight for me, or smaller for me, larger for me? How can you alleviate those concerns from a fit point of view? And the third one that we've seen we could use the data a lot for from a social commerce point of view is reviews, and understanding how some other customers feel about it, so that you can read relevant reviews, not having to go through everything. But how can we give you the assurance that yes, 25 other people have bought it, and 10 of them feel X about it, 5 of them feel Y about it, so that people feel that, yep, I don't have to do this research anymore, I know what I'm going to buy. So those are 3 areas that I think data could be very useful for: discovery, which is the discovery part, the fit part, and also the reviews part. So those are 3 areas that I can think of.
And I mean, let's say that in the coming months, even the companies that haven't digitally transformed yet, they will definitely build or work with a third-party player for e-commerce. What type of investment do you think are necessary in order to treat data safely and improve customer experience?
Yeah, I think in terms of an investment, I would definitely, how much ever bigger or smaller the business is, I always suggest and recommend to them, the first thing they need to invest in is invest their time to see what do they want to do with the data. Because data is available instantly. You can, if you're using, say, Shopify or Magento, whatever it's used, data is already available, WooCommerce, or build your own. It's about what do you want to do with it, and then come up with the right strategy on where to store it, how to process it, what kind of teams to build to translate that into something that you want to use. And I think all of that is very downstream, is how I like to think about it. The first thing is whoever runs the business or the senior leadership needs to decide what they want to do with it. Do they want to increase profits, which is a completely different thing to do they want to increase their market share, which is completely different to do you want to cut costs, do you want to, what is it that you want to do? If your next 12 months is all about only increasing your customer base, then you don't have to worry about a lot of data that you want to track. You can do it later, but for now, just focus on the bits that you want. And that will narrow your area of what you want to do and also make you do it successfully and hire the right kind of people, because different people have different skill sets. You don't have to go hiring a data scientist, a data engineer, a data analyst. You just hire the right people. Maybe the data, you just want to solve certain problems. So that's what I would look in terms of an investment, is investment from the leadership or the owners to see what exactly that they want to solve for the next 12 months with the current realities.
So we can basically summarize saying that they should set clear objectives first before even handling the type of data, deciding what to do with that.
Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, basically figure out the problems and then go looking for solutions, rather than buy the solutions and then find a problem to solve.
And I think, I mean, that we are running out of time. So I would like to ask you to leave the audience maybe with what do you think is going to be the next frontier in the use of data?
I think the next frontier I would like to believe is, yeah, it's a really good question. So one thing that I can already see is customers have become more and more demanding. And I have this constant joke around, a lot of our customers complain that, oh, your order was late. And then we go in and look into when it was delivered. It's not late, it was delivered on time. And so they feel it is late. They feel it could have been earlier. So even if you tell them, I can deliver in 2 days, they're like, no, why don't you deliver in 1 day? If a company X can deliver in 1 day, why can't you? So basically customer expectations have become higher. They expect you to know a lot more. So the next frontier is basically, when you deal with a customer, you pretty much you would be able to cater to all their current needs and demands on, you have to know me very well, you have to know my taste very well, you have to know all of that. So all of that will become default rather than good to have, is how I like to think about it. So a personalized web page will not be a good to have, it will become the default. A personalized experience will not be good to have, it will be default. So those things would be I'm not sure if you want to call it the frontier, but that will become the next default. And then the things on future will be a bit more about inspiring customers to buy something else or showing them what else they can do with it. I think that will probably be the next thing that will start coming up.
Of course, we need to make sure that we kind of keep a balance with the data security and privacy that we spoke before.
Yes.
Okay, so thank you very much for your time. And if anybody in the audience has any question, I'm sure eTail Virtual Summit will be able to deliver them to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Esther.